I went and asked you guys what video game item took you the longest to farm, and these are just some of the comments I received. If you ever want to be like featured in one of these videos, be sure to follow me on Instagram, TikTok, or even YouTube Shorts. Just follow me in those locations, and if you see me on your Shorts feed, be sure to leave a comment. You might be featured in one of these videos in the future. Like I said, this one is just what video game items took you guys the longest to farm. Now, obviously, since this is like primarily a Destiny channel, I have to talk about some Destiny items. So, for starters, you have Almejo saying that you took over 256 runs just to get Icebreaker. That to me is insane, even for a weapon of that caliber. Icebreaker is honestly, it's a good weapon, but it's not good enough to be taking that many runs. I wonder if you did any of the challenges to kind of increase the RNG, because I know that around that time, that's when they started implementing those changes. But even then, 256 runs, that's just too much. It gives me flashbacks of like early D1 where it took me that many runs just to get like Vex Mythoclast or Necrochasm or something like that. Really, it was a nightmare back in the day. Speaking of Vex Mythoclast, we have Labs Gaming saying it took him over 67 clears to get Vex Mythoclast back when you can only do it 3 clears per run. Now, maybe I'm mistaken, but I'm pretty certain this is still the case. I don't know if they ever changed it to where it's like you can actively, farm the weapon over and over and over again. I feel like Destiny loot chases are so inconsistent where it's like, what's weekly, what's not, what can I farm, what can I farm, and I don't really quite remember because Vex Mythoclast in D2 at least was very easy for me. And D1 was very difficult, but in D2, I got it pretty quickly. And I'm glad it didn't take me this many runs because 67 clear, that's actually a lot. That's like, what, like 8, 10 weeks, something around there? 3 times. Actually, that's way more than that. Like 20 weeks. I'm way off. My math is terrible. Terrible. Terrible there. Terrible math. But yeah, that's just too many weeks to be farming for something because by that point, the next content's already out. And it always feels painful when you're farming the old content for the old gear when the new stuff is out. Next, you have Stealth6308 talking about Black Ops 4 Dark Matter. Now, he straight up says that the game was ass, but the Dark Matter was the best ever. Now, I am actually in the opposite boat here because I actually really, really enjoyed the Black Ops 3 Dark Matter, and that was the only COD Mastery camo I ever got. I played Call of Duty a lot back in the day. I was big on Black Ops 2, COD Ghost, Black Ops 3. I love those games a lot. And Dark Matter, that was the only camo chase I ever went for, and I'm glad I did it. It's one of those few achievements I look back on throughout like my gaming repertoire, and I'm like, that's one of those moments I enjoy. One of the fonder memories, especially since Call of Duty nowadays has kind of just been all about the camos. This was back when it's still a novel idea and a novel concept, and Black Ops 4 might have had the best in your opinion, but just in general, any sort of COD Mastery camo or Mastery camo in any sort of game, always a grind, always a long endeavor, and I'm glad to see at least one person mentioning it, even if it is Black Ops 4's, which, admittedly was probably the game that made me quit Call of Duty entirely because why do I gotta auto heal myself? Next up, we got somebody saying the slime staff, and he said that his RNG was terrible. Now, I'm assuming you mean the slime staff from Terraria. Now, that's a game that I have very limited knowledge on. I have played it before, and I have beaten Terraria. I have killed the Moon Lord, but it was just one of those moments where it's like, I beat the game, but I don't remember anything from it. And the slime staff, I don't know if I got it. I don't know if I never did. I don't even remember the item in general. I had to look this one up. But if what it is I'm reading is true, oh my god, Terraria has some insanely rare items. We'll get to some more of them in the future in this video, but my god. Terraria is just one of those unforgiving games, but at the end of the day, it is a PvE game that's basically all about farming. I love Terraria. I might need to play that game again, to be honest. It's been like 4 or 5 years since I played it. Next up, we got a comment about a game called Elseworld, which was the item Nocturne of Hernia. Now, when I actually looked this up, I actually just copied the word hernia and got incredibly confused when, a medical terminology was brought up in front of me. But when I looked at Nocturne of Hernia, it gave me the correct item. And I've never played Elseworld. I actually have zero knowledge on this game, so I'm just going to take your word for it. 700 to 800 runs. That sounds insane. I don't know exactly what you were running to get this item. Probably gonna do some research here and probably throw it on the screen to show you what you have to actually do to get the item, but anything in the hundreds, really. Anything above 100 is just way too much. We play games and have some very, brutal RNG in some of these games here, but anything above 100 runs, that's just not even brutal. That's just downright unfair. When we're getting to like the triple digits, it just means we're not even farming anything anymore. We're wasting our time. That's how it feels. But I'm glad you got your item at least because nothing feels better than having that item that's eluded you for so long and then you finally get it. Now, obviously, you can't have a loot video talking about how rare loot is without mentioning Borderlands at least once or twice. And we have this man saying, a perfect parts OP10 Northly from Hyperius, and he says OP10 bosses are no joke. Now, I want to kind of add my little notes on here, which is that it's kind of insane how a single update basically killed 90% of the endgame in Borderlands 2. And I know that might be a bit of a hyperbole, but if you don't know exactly what the OP10 patch did, it took some of the harder bosses in the game that were already very difficult and gave them like 5 times the amount of health. I don't know if Hyperius was specifically one of them, but I know that Veracitus from the Hammerlock DLC, it has more health than anything else I've ever seen in my entire life. It's quite literally probably in like the quadrillions or something like that. I don't know, making up numbers here, but I kind of wish we can go back to before the Fight for Sanctuary DLC. Not because that DLC was bad by any means, it was a phenomenal DLC, but it came with some unintended consequences, and it basically made OP levels, at least OP9 and OP10, basically unbearable. And if you're an endgame player who wants to do everything, you have to go through those levels eventually. And I'm telling you, it's not a fun experience. I remember doing OP 1 through 8 when I was like really, really young, when the game was, not new by any means, but kind of towards the end of its life cycle. And I can tell you that was a painful experience. So I can only imagine doing OP10 farming Hyperius. That's just, I'm sorry, my friend. That sounded like pain. Keeping with Borderlands 2 for a second, we got Bwah saying the 94 Sham and the Cobra sniper rifle in Borderlands 2. Took 3 days for the Sham and I don't know how many weeks for the Cobra. Now, me personally, I feel like this would be flipped. I've seen horror stories about the 94 Sham where it took literal months to get. And me personally, I never have seen that drop myself. I had a 94 Sham, but it was not legit. It was given to me by a friend, and for all I know, that could have been a gibbed item. I have no clue. And as for the Cobra, though, I actually have seen that drop before. Actually, I've really seen the Cobra drop. It was during that awkward period where we had the 61 level up to 72, and I remember leveling up my character specifically in the Barroom Blitz, and I was on my way back to Sanctuary, and I just killed one of the bruiser guys and just dropped it for me. It was one of those wild moments where I didn't even really register what had happened at that time. But I knew it was rare, I knew what I had gotten, and I feel like anybody who's ever been in that moment where like they got a very rare item that they didn't even really realize was rare, you kind of just feel very about it. Still, keeping with Borderlands, we have the 17th coolest name. To me, that's the number 1 coolest name. But he says the Pearl Carnage on Borderlands 2, and he's still farming it to this day. Now, I had to put this in the video because recently Borderlands 4 actually reintroduced Pearlescence, and it's kind of a stark contrast how we have this man over here still farming for a Borderlands 2 Pearlescent, but people are getting Pearlescence for free just by logging into the game and completing a questline on Borderlands 4. Stark contrast, and I know that they were like, we want to give people a taste of what a Pearl... No, I don't care. I think things that should be rare should remain rare. I don't want any free handouts, and this guy right here, still farming the Carnage. This is the type of brutal RNG I want in Borderlands games. I don't want no free handout, especially when it's something that's supposed to be the pinnacle level. I haven't played Borderlands 4 in a long time, and when I saw that they were giving up her lessons essentially for free, it just rubbed me the wrong way, and it made me not even want to even engage with that DLC. I might download the game when the actual, main story DLC comes out, but the little Headhunter pack they released with Pearlescence didn't do it for me just by watching the gameplay and again seeing the discourse of what Pearlescence are, dropping like candy. It's just dumb. I feel like they should be rare. They should remain rare, even if they're not good, even if they're not even good. Just make them rare, just so I can say that I got one and I was lucky. This is the final one about Borderlands 2, I promise. Spec says, I feel you all on the Hive. 892 runs to get a perfect parts Hive. However, it was underleveled, and he cried about it. Now, I put this in the video because even if you get the perfect thing, the exact thing you want, it can still be underleveled. And I know I just said a second ago that I kind of enjoy brutal RNG with like Pearlescence and all that, but one of the things I dislike about Borderlands was the fact that items could still drop underleveled. It was always one of the dumbest mechanics. It's kind of dumb how you could farm so much and put so much effort into an item and it not be the level you are. I feel like any game that I ever play, if there is some sort of issue where items are dropping below my current level, and there is no way for me to increase the level of the item, bad system. It's one of the worst systems in loot games, one of the worst systems in gaming in general, unless it's like, region locked, where like if you're in a specific zone, it's levels for that zone. But if I'm like, in an endgame area, fighting endgame enemies at the maximum level, and it drops one level below, I'm gonna cry, just as you did. I would cry. Moving back to Destiny for a second, we got Wolverine talking about the Escalation Protocol shotgun, taking him 76 clears, and by the time he got it, it was nerfed a few weeks later. Now, I put this in this video because this is exactly what happened to me with Gallahorn way back in the day. Now, I got like no comments about Gallahorn, which was quite surprising to me, but I guess it's because Gallahorn technically in D1 you couldn't quote unquote farm it because it was just a random drop. But that's exactly what happened to me with Gallahorn. By the time I got that weapon, they had already announced the nerf for it. Now I just had like lukewarm feelings. It kind of sucks when you get a rare piece of loot that you know you wanted for a long time, but by the time you got it, you know that the fun that people were having with it is limited. You know, it's got a shelf life. It's going to get a nerf soon, and the fun that you are having now with it, well, yes, you get to experience it. You're not going to be able to experience it forever. And I feel like with certain weapons, it kind of sucks knowing that knowledge of that nerf that's coming soon. And I'd rather enjoy something knowing that even though it might get nerfed, it hasn't been announced yet. I also do want to note like how brutal Isolation Protocol in general was. You know, I feel like one of the big problems with that entire activity was the fact that you had to basically hope you match made with people. Not only do you have to hope there'd be people in the area, you also had to hope they were good players. So you were basically not only fighting the RNG of getting the shotgun in the first place, you were fighting the RNG of one, finding players, and two, they were even equipped enough to even do the activity you were there for. So this was painful for me to read because it just gave me some bad nostalgia. And also, Escalation Protocol, while it's a good activity, I don't really have that many fun memories of it outside of just getting the weapons. The actual experience of farming the items was terrible. Okay, this one just makes me laugh. 66 runs for Navigator. Bought my best friend the dungeon key, we both get it on his first clear. Isn't that just the funniest thing in the world? Honestly, I have a friend who, you know, played D2 with a lot, and he about had the same amount of runs for Navigator as well, about 60 clears. And it was just funny whenever one of us would get the exotic and he didn't, because I think I got Navigator like 4 times in the span of him getting it once. And it is very nice though that at least in your case, you were generous and you rewarded not just yourself but your teammate as well. And sometimes I'd rather lead people to the treasures I cannot obtain than, you know, nobody have it at all. I know I said enough of Borderlands, but I just found this in my snipping folder. Perfect bee shield if you know you know. I know. There was 2 different ways of farming it, Hunter Hell Quest or the Tree Ants in the 4th DLC. Both of them sucked. The bee shield was just so good though, you had to do the farm every time. Like, the bee shield was one of those items, it didn't matter what character you played, you were probably going to farm a bee shield at one point. It's just that good. It had an instant slot in everybody's backpack no matter what character you played. And honestly, the bee shield might be probably the most powerful item. Nah, that might be a hot take, but I think it might be one of the most powerful items in just gaming in general because it made everything else good. You could use a white pistol with a bee shield and it would be good. That's just how good the shield was. And, you know I said no more Borderlands, but I had to talk about the bee shield at least once. I mean, come on. Especially with all the different part variations, you can get bee shields that would have like 5-10 second delays with like terrible damage, or you can get a bee shield with like 5 second delay and have maximum damage possible. Really, the variation between a good bee shield and a bad bee shield is night and day. Really, like farming for a good bee shield was a pain. You can sit here and say you farmed a bee shield, but did you get a good one? That's a real question. That's why he says, if you know, you know. Because getting a good one was the hard part. Something that I didn't see a lot of was actually going to be Pokemon. I figured I might see a little bit more of this considering just how big the new Pokemon game was. But somebody said Shiny Gengar. When I was a kid, I hunted for it. Didn't get it until I was in my 20s. Pokemon in general might have some of the most brutal RNG in gaming history because really think about how many different Pokemons there are and think about how every single Pokemon has one variation of it that's 10 times, probably not 10, probably way more than that, but way more rare than your normal version. So you can think of like the most rare Pokemon that's a legendary that you only see one per game and imagine that shiny version. Like that's incredibly rare. People will be doing constant resets over and over and over again just to try to get that shiny version. And, I remember seeing a clip a long time ago of this guy who was playing Pokemon, not once, not twice, not 3 times, but 9 times at the same time. Literally 9 different screens on his computer, all of the same thing, doing constant resets over and over and over again, just to try to get the shiny version of that Pokemon. Like, we talk about grinding in Destiny, but people were grinding Pokemon even crazier than that. Like, oh my god, that's insane. I'm happy you got your Gengar, though. For me, I've actually only ever gotten one shiny Pokemon in my lifetime, and it was during Pokemon Soul Silver, and it was actually, if I remember correctly, the Togepi egg. My egg actually hatched into a shiny Togepi. Didn't know what that meant at the time, because I was like, 12, but I got a shiny Pokemon at that time. Don't have that save anymore. Don't even know where the cartridge is, but I remember getting a shiny Togepi because it had like that, like the circular effect whenever you'd spawn, like you throw the Pokeball and it'd be like a circle. I remember that. But shiny Pokemon, probably the rarest thing that might be mentioned on this list. Next up, we got Seabro talking about Destiny again. He's talking about the Fake Bringer. Fake Bringer. Fake? Not gonna lie, I read that as Fate Bringer the first time, and I just realized it said Fake Bringer. Good play on words. The Fake Bringer and Mago Loop God Roll, since I don't have it to this day despite farming the hell out of it in the Undying Mind Strike back in Destiny 1. Now, it also says Rod of Discord, but I'll talk about that in a second with another comment. But the Imago Loop, that's one of those guns that I feel like everybody has some sort of nostalgic memory about in terms of being a Destiny player. Like, everybody enjoyed Fatebringer back in the day. It was just the most coveted hand cannon in the entire game. The old, what was it, the loadout? It was Fatebringer, Black Hammer, and Gallahorn. Like, those three weapons right there, I think are like the most iconic weapons in Destiny history. Just that single loadout. And people wanted to have a version of Fatebringer in year 2. Now, I never actually got a good roll either. I never farmed, probably didn't farm as much as you did. Didn't even really remember farming Undying Mind like that. But I do know that inevitably they did bring Fatebringer back. Not only that, they brought it back as an exotic version too. And, I just had to put this on the list because it's one of those moments where it's like, they give you an ulterior version of something just to give you the original version. It's kind of like how when they gave us, Funnel Web as a Recluse replacement, but then they just gave us Recluse again. I don't know. Bungie has a bad habit of creating cool loot and creating a version of that loot that's just an off-brand version that's meant to be a replicate, and then they just give you the old version again because that's what we want in the first place. Imago Loop was cool, but I kind of feel like we never needed it in the first place. This was one of those items I actually do vividly remember farming from Terraria, because not only was the RNG of getting it to drop very low, the actual enemies you needed to kill also had a very low spawn chance. So not only were you fighting RNG of getting it to drop, you were fighting RNG of getting the enemies who could drop it to even spawn. So it was double RNG in a game that already has very brutal RNG. Now, if you don't know what the Rod of Discord does, essentially it just allows you to teleport as long as you can teleport wherever your mouse cursor goes to. You can teleport. Very cool item. Very powerful item. And an effect like that in Terraria is actually very OP. And I understand why this is rare. But, oh my god, this is brutal. I don't know if I got this one either. I don't really remember much of my time in Terraria, but I do remember vividly farming this. Because I remember thinking to myself when I was trying to kill those, I think they're called like Cursed Elementalists or something like that. I remember thinking to myself, oh my god, these guys never spawn in. I hate my life. I want them to spawn in. Where are they at? Because everybody knows the things that become the rarest, the rarest item in any video game is always what you're farming. Everybody knows that. And the Rod of Discord already being rare as it is, and being the item that I'm farming in that given moment, just meant it was never going to drop. It probably didn't. It might have. I don't know. I just have very, very weird feelings towards Terraria right now because I want to play the game, but at the same time, I look at the odds of this item right here and I'm like, do I really want to subject myself to that? Next up, we got a comment about Diablo 3, the Cosmic Wings. They only drop from one specific mob that has a 1 in 5 chance of even spawning in a special area that has a 3 to 4 chance of showing up in the regular game. Now, this again, just like with the Rod of Discord a second ago, this is just RNG on top of RNG. And I feel like those are just the worst offenders when it comes to loot games, because not only are you making me farm a specific weapon or a specific cosmetic or item, I gotta farm a specific thing beforehand to even see if it'll even drop. So here he's saying there's a 3 to 4 chance of even having the area show up in the game. So that means you gotta run through your game hoping that it spawns a certain location that you needed to be in, and then when you're in that location you have to hope that the certain enemy you want to spawn spawns. This actually reminds me a lot of another game, which is Remnant 2. I had no comments about this game doing this during this video, but Remnant 2 is another game that had very brutal RNG in the same sense of this one right here, kind of like this comment, where there was an item I remember farming for. It was the Night Weaver's Grudge. It required having a specific campaign start, and then you would do the middle section, which was a labyrinth, and then you would go to Yesha, and you would want to hope specifically that there would be a certain dungeon in the Yesha world area. So not only did you have to get the correct starting location, you had to hope by the time you got to the second location, which was Yesha, that it had the specific dungeon you needed. Now, I remember resetting over and over and over again. It would get to a point where I would check all the dungeons in Yesha. If I didn't get the one I needed, immediately reset. Because what's the point of continuing? Just keep on farming. Reset your game over and over and over again, because that's what I had to do in order to get what I wanted. And that's kind of what this reminds me of, where you have to go through the entire game just in hopes that the specific location you needed to spawned in. Now this next one isn't really farming something per se because it's more of just an accomplishment, a incredible feat. Love with Hernandez says Halo MCC completing all campaigns with Lasso on. Now, if you don't know what Lasso is, it means Legendary All Skulls on. Now, that basically means you are not only playing the game on the hardest difficulty, you're playing the game with ankle weights on and, brutal modifiers that make the game way more difficult than it needs to be. And to complete that entire campaign, well, not just the campaign, all campaigns with Lasso on. Incredible feat. I had to throw this in the video just because that's just a struggle. I never really played Halo growing up, but I know that the few instances I have played Halo, I got my ass beat. And I wasn't playing with no skulls on. So, being a person who was able to complete that feat, you deserve some praise. That's insane. Next up, we have the Birdman, talking about the Desert Perpetual Exotic taking about 35 clears, but that's not the part I want to focus in on. It's actually the second bit, which is there was an exotic in Division 2 that I accidentally deleted and just got it to drop the other day. Took me over 2 years to get it again. Now, I had to put this in the video because I feel like anybody who's played loot games a long time has had that inevitably happen to them where they had a very cool piece of gear that they loved, a piece of gear that they enjoyed using, and then accidentally held X on it a little too long, or they weren't paying attention when dismantling something in their inventory, or maybe it wasn't locked and protected or something like that. We've all done it before, and it's a struggle when that happens. It's probably one of the most gut-wrenching moments ever because not only does it suck, having rare loot that takes forever to get, but then when you have that rare loot that you finally got and you accidentally delete it, like that's just one of those gut-wrenching moments that just I feel like it makes every person who's played loot games that just our stomachs turn at that thought. We just immediately get sick at that concept because anybody who's anybody has some sort of attachment to a piece of loot that they enjoy. Imagine your favorite piece of loot right now. Imagine you accidentally deleted it. How devastated would you be? And that's just I had to put this on the list because it makes me feel very, very cringy. It just does. It makes me cringe a little bit because I think about my midnight Q from D2 and I'm like, I don't want to delete that. If I accidentally deleted that, I'd probably kill myself. Next up, we got Dale talking about Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate. He says a charm with 3 slots and +4 to Hone Blade with +8 artillery. Now he also states that Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate players will know how god tier this charm is for Charged Blade, and it took him 7 years to get because it's an RNG charm. Now I'm going to take your word for it because my knowledge on Monster Hunter is basically nothing. All I know is that you kill monsters and you, I don't know, turn their hides into materials and shit. I don't know. But that type of dedication to continue to go back to a game for 7 years is insane. I feel like we live in a very fast-paced gaming environment where most people are turning over games within like the months. You play a game for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks max, and you're on to the next thing. 7 years. That's insane. That's dedication. And I'm glad you got your item because I couldn't see myself doing that. 7 years on a game. Coming from a D2 player, by the way. Coming from a Destiny 2 player. I know, hypocritical. And to go ahead and cap off the video with the final comment, because this comment was the one that made me laugh the most, we have Xavier saying, the longest thing that has taken him to farm, a real friend. I'm right there with you, my guy. Virtual hugs all around. I thank you all so much for watching, and if you ever want to be featured in one of these videos, keep eyes out on all your shorts feeds. I'm on TikTok, I'm on Instagram, and I'm on YouTube Shorts. Anyways, thank you so much for watching, and yeah. This is a different type of content format. Don't know if this will work out or not. See how it goes. I'm going to upload it. I don't know. Thank you so much for watching, and really, have a nice day.